April 8, 1943. 27,000 feet above Caen, France. The oxygen mask did little to mask Oberleutnant Ralph Hermachines' grin as he observed the awkward shapes laboriously ascending toward his group through the perfectly clear canopy of his Focke-Wulf 190A5. The seasoned ace of Jagdgeschwader 26 carefully watched the American fighters, which were appearing in combat over Nazi-occupied Europe for the first time. "The enemy has provided us with flying milk bottles," he radioed his wingman. Laughter barely contained at the sight of the enormous Republic P-47 Thunderbolts toiling to reach their altitude. Beneath them, 16 P-47C Thunderbolts from the 4th Fighter Group climbed ponderously in close formation, their 2,000 horsepower Pratt & Whitney R2800 double Wasp engines laboring against their 7-ton mass. To Luftwaffe airmen used to sleek Spitfires and agile Russian planes, these bulky American aircraft seemed downright ridiculous. The fat-bodied fuselages capped with greenhouse-like cockpits, stubby wings clearly undersized for their hulking frames, and giant propellers unlike anything else in the Luftwaffe, all contributed to the spectacle. What her machine could not have known, nor any of his fellow German aviators circling menacingly above, was that they were witnessing the arrival of the machine that would, step by step, obliterate the Luftwaffe's fighter fleet. In a year and a half, these so-called flying milk bottles would change from the subject of mockery to the source of dread, with their 8.50 caliber Browning machine guns making a sound more feared than any other in German-held skies. The arithmetic of devastation was already present within those broad wings. With 3,400 rounds of ammunition and the capacity to fire a total of 6,000 rounds per minute, their concentrated armament could slice a Messerschmitt in under 2 seconds. The metamorphosis began on that April morning when Major Donald Blakesley, leading the 335th Fighter Squadron, caught sight of the Germans lining up for an interception. Having recently switched over from RAF Spitfires, this former Eagle Squadron pilot was one of the few who understood what the rest had yet to discover. To survive in the P-47 meant forgetting much of what they thought they knew about aerial combat. The Thunderbolt was a complete break from standard fighter doctrine. While German engineers had pursued lightweight interceptors designed for rapid climbing and turning, Republic Aviation conceived something entirely new, a high-altitude giant that used weight, strength, and heavy weaponry to shift the paradigm of air fighting. Among the 56 American airmen scattered across the skies of France that day were future luminaries, pilots destined to become aces and strike terror in the hearts of Luftwaffe flyers. Yet on April 8, 1943, they were mere apprentices flying an unproven craft, pitted against the most battle-hardened airmen on the planet. The Germans had seen continuous combat since 1939, accumulating veterans from campaigns in Poland, France, Britain, and the Soviet Union. The Americans, meanwhile, were experiencing their baptism by fire. This account is a chronicle of how sheer production power eclipsed tactical expertise, how numbers and technical achievement merged to produce crushing supremacy, and how Luftwaffegeers became panic as they learned what synchronized Browning guns could do at 400 yards. The Republic P-47 Thunderbolt was born during America's June 1940 emergency. As German fighters surged over France, Alexander Kartveli, Republic Aviation's Georgian-born head designer, was given urgent orders by the U.S. Army Air Corps. They required a high-altitude interceptor that could face the Luftwaffe's top planes. The machine Kartveli engineered instead was a behemoth that pushed the boundaries of what people thought possible. "It's going to be a dinosaur," Kartveli confessed to his team, "but it'll be a well-proportioned dinosaur." When the XP-47B prototype took to the air for the first time on May 6, 1941, virtually everyone who saw it was astonished. With an empty weight of 9,900 pounds, it was 65% heavier than its forerunner, the P-43 Lancer. Its huge turbo supercharger system, with complicated piping routed through the rear fuselage, gave it a distinctly swollen look. Test pilots approaching the hulking craft for the first time always asked the same thing: does this beast actually fly? Not only did it take flight, but at altitude it flew like nothing else. The 18-cylinder, 2,000 horsepower Pratt & Whitney R2800 double wasp engine could remain at maximum output even at 27,000 feet, where the Luftwaffe fighters suffocated in the thin air. The turbo supercharger, powered by exhaust gases, delivered sea-level capability into the stratosphere, where ordinary superchargers simply could not cope. Major Hubert Hub ZKA, who led the 56th Fighter Group during their training at Bridgeport, Connecticut, at first had a strong dislike for the plane. His squadron experienced the loss of 18 pilots along with 41 aircraft in training mishaps from September 1942 through January 1943. The P-47 claimed the lives of more Americans during training than the Germans managed to in the conflict's opening months. It would ground loop during landings, torque roll as it took off, and dive so aggressively that pilots encountered compressibility, freezing their controls as shock waves built up on the wings. Still, those able to handle its quirks uncovered something remarkable. Lieutenant Robert Johnson, an Oklahoma farm boy destined to be one of the nation's leading aces with 27 kills, recalled his initial flight. He said it was as though you strapped yourself onto a locomotive. The force was astonishing. The sensation was not of flying but rather of steering it. The first combat missions in April and May 1943 seemed to support all the German assumptions. The P-47s could not outturn the Faller Wolf 190s, outclimb the Messid 109s, nor rival their quick reactions at middle altitudes. Luftwaffe airmen quickly worked out tactics to take advantage of these flaws, attacking from beneath where the portly Thunderbolts were sluggish, and forcing turn fights where nimbleness trumped weaponry. Hauptmann Joseph Pips Priller, as commander of Jagdgeschwader 26, sent a report to headquarters following his first meeting with the type. The new U.S. fighter is fodder for destruction. It moves like a lorry, turns like a loaded train, and ascends like a cow in calf. Our flyers are calling them Indiomas, easy marks acting like combatants. The numbers backed up German belief. In their starting month of activity, the American fighter groups lost 14 Thunderbolts for only 3 confirmed German aircraft destroyed. The RAF, watching from their Spitfire units, quietly hinted that Americans might want to rethink their pick of aircraft. British flyers joked that the wisest way to evade in a P-47 was to unbuckle and run around the spacious cockpit. Yet something unusual was occurring in those opening skirmishes that German intelligence overlooked. The P-47s shot down had taken extraordinary damage before succumbing. One plane came back from the May 4th sortie with 21 cannon holes and over 100 machine gun impacts. Such wounds would have torn apart a Messerschmitt or Spitfire. The big radial engine, which lacked delicate coolant systems, withstood blows that would have stalled a liquid-cooled fighter immediately. More importantly, when P-47s managed to bring their guns to bear, the outcome was devastating. The Thunderbolt's armament formed a focused zone of destruction unfamiliar to German airmen. In contrast to the rifle-caliber arms of early warplanes or cannons with short ammo supply, the American plane could sustain fire for more than 30 seconds, a lifetime in a dogfight. The turning point in German opinion came on June 26, 1943 above Luz, France. The event featured 2nd Lieutenant Robert S. Johnson of the 61st Fighter Squadron in a confrontation that became legendary among both allies and adversaries. Johnson's group of 4 P-47s was returning from escort when 16 Faller Wolf 190s from 2 JG-26 under Hauptmann Wilhelm Ferdinand Galland, the younger sibling of the renowned Adolf Galland, sprang upon them. The Germans carried out a flawless assault, swooping down out of the sun with a stunning speed edge. In the tail end of the group, Johnson's Thunderbolt was raked by crossfire from several enemies, suffering crippling strikes in the engagement's opening seconds. 20 mm shells burst across his plane. The cockpit canopy was smashed, hydraulic oil fountained into the cabin, the engine's cowling was ripped away, and flames started behind the dashboard. Hit in both nose and leg by shrapnel and fragments, Johnson tried ejecting, only to find the canopy was immobilized. A 20 mm round had detonated in the canopy's track, welding it shut. He was locked in a mortally damaged airplane at 27,000 feet. What followed challenged every belief about how much punishment a fighter could take in battle. With oil entirely obscuring his view forward, a barely operational engine that bucked violently, and flight controls that only sometimes worked, Johnson still brought the aircraft to level flight and pointed it toward England. The P-47 held together with battle damage that would have broken up any rival fighter. Things became even more dire. A solitary Focke-Wulf 190, piloted by an unidentified aviator from 2JG-26, spotted the heavily damaged Thunderbolt making its slow way toward the channel at under 170 miles per hour. Despite detailed historical investigations, this Luftwaffe pilot has never been conclusively named, though several candidates have emerged from German records of that day. What ensued ranks as one of the most remarkable moments in the history of aerial combat. The German pursued Johnson's P-47 from behind and unleashed fire from his 420mm cannon and a pair of 13mm machine guns. With no means to maneuver, Johnson simply crouched beneath his armor plate and hoped for survival. The Thunderbolt withstood a complete barrage of cannon shells. Afterward, the German shifted position and fired again, now relying solely on his machine guns. With his cannon out of ammunition, the German aviator pulled up alongside, peering incredulously at the battered plane. Johnson could clearly view his face, youthful, blonde, with his expression transitioning from assurance to uncertainty and then to something akin to fear. The German shifted position and fired the last of his machine gun ammo into the Thunderbolt. Nevertheless, the P-47 kept flying. Once more, the German came alongside, shook his head as if in disbelief, offered a casual salute, and banked away, likely empty of ammunition. Johnson managed to land his P-47 at Manston, its engine dying on the runway. The ground crew chief stopped tallying bullet holes once he counted 200. A cannon shell had burst mere inches from Johnson's head. Another exploded against the armor behind his seat. The engine had sustained direct impacts. Some control cables were partly cut. 3 of the aircraft's 4 main longerons, the backbone of the fuselage, had been shot through. Yet, the Thunderbolt still delivered him home. Johnson's miraculous arrival sent shockwaves through both the American and German air services. U.S. engineers, analyzing the wreckage, realized they had undervalued their own plane's resilience. German intelligence officers with reports from the second section of Jagdgeschwader 26 at first dismissed the account as fantasy. No plane, they insisted, could take such damage, but statements from several pilots affirmed the improbable story. The Thunderbolt had absorbed the full measure of the Luftwaffe's top interceptor and survived. By July 1943, American airmen were beginning to exploit the P-47's real assets. Lieutenant Colonel Hubert Zimke, commanding officer of the 56th Fighter Group, unlocked these secrets after harsh hands-on learning. Avoid turning with them, don't climb low with them, harness your weight, harness your power, harness your guns. The Thunderbolt's impressive mass, originally considered a flaw, became a tactical advantage. Nothing could catch it in a dive. Descending from 30,000 feet, a P-47 could reach 550 miles per hour, exceeding the speed of any German fighter, even on a vertical descent. This velocity could be exchanged for altitude in a climbing maneuver that left pursuers hopelessly behind. Captain Walker, Bud Mahurin, destined to become among the earliest U.S. aces in Europe, refined a method known as boom and zoom. Among pilots, it was nicknamed the Thunderbolt turkey shoot. Instead of classic close-quarters fighting, P-47 squadrons would ascend to 30,000 feet, out of practical reach of German aircraft. When Luftwaffe fighters ventured below, the Thunderbolts would roll over and dive, achieving velocities that made aiming at them nearly impossible for German defenders. At the bottom of these dives, the American heavy machine guns would thunder. German pilots who lived through it described the experience as confronting a barricade of gunfire. Combined, the P-47's weapons created an inescapable zone of devastation. Aircraft trapped in their line of fire did not merely fall, they fell to pieces. The true scope of American gunpowder emerged during the dual raids on Schweinfurt and Regensburg on August 17, 1943, the deepest push into Germany executed up to that point. This operation would showcase both the P-47's shortcomings, its range, even using extra fuel tanks, and its frightening capacity when used correctly. Major David Schilling, at the head of the 62nd Fighter Squadron, encountered a formation of Messerschmitt 110 heavy fighters preparing to attack B-17 bombers with their formidable cannons and rocket munitions. These twin-engine German aircraft, heavily armed but less agile, were the Luftwaffe's mainstay bomber-destroyers. Schilling led 4 Thunderbolts into a dive from 28,000 feet. Unteroffizier Heinrich Roth, a surviving gunner in one of the Mi-110s, recounted during a POW interrogation, "The American planes descended like avenging hammers. I began firing at 800 meters, good impacts. I saw my rounds hit a fighter's wing. The P-47 barely flinched. Then its pilot shot back. The craft in front of us simply fell apart, not shot down, but obliterated. Wings split from the main body, tail and cockpit atomized into debris. Within 2 seconds, an Mi-110 was reduced to nothing. 8 Messerschmitt 100s and 110s were lost in under a minute." German flyers had never encountered such overwhelming gunfire. Every P-47 possessed 425 rounds per gun, totaling 3,400 rounds that weighed nearly 900 pounds. When the guns were set to converge, usually at 300 yards, all 8 streams of fire met within a circle approximately 6 feet across. Anything within that zone encountered 100 bullets every second, each traveling at 2,900 feet per second. The ammo itself exemplified American industrial muscle. German fighters, by comparison, typically carried 120 to 200 shells per 20 mm weapon, but American pilots could maintain continuous fire for over 30 seconds. The typical combat ammunition load combined armor-piercing incendiary, tracer, and standard ball rounds in sequences intended both to destroy targets and start fires. Lieutenant Colonel Francis Gabby Gabreski, who would rise to become America's leading ace in Europe with 28 confirmed kills, recounted the results. "When you strike them with all 8 guns, they do more than just go down, they blow apart. I witnessed a 109 literally severed in 2, with the tail going one direction, and the fuselage and wings in another. The pilot never realized what hit him." By September 1943, the Luftwaffe was coming to understand another grim truth about the P-47. Its performance increased significantly at higher altitudes, while German aircraft struggled. The turbo-supercharged double Wasp engine could sustain its full rated power even at 30,000 feet. German planes based on single-stage or two-stage mechanical superchargers found their effectiveness drop sharply above 25,000 feet. Oberleutnant Hans Philipp, among Germany's highest-scoring aces with 206 victories, met this challenge with fatal consequences on October 8, 1943. Leading Jagdgeschwader 1 against a B-17 formation flying at 28,000 feet above Bremen, Philipp found his Focke-Wulf 190A6 sluggish and hard to maneuver in the thin atmosphere. The BMW 801 engine, formidable at moderate heights, was almost starved of air nearly 6 miles above ground. When P-47s from the 56th Fighter Group swooped down on his group from 32,000 feet, the German aircraft were defenseless. Robert Johnson, now a seasoned fighter pilot en route to becoming an ace, was flying at 31,000 feet when he identified Philipp's notable Focke-Wulf with its ornate nose markings. Johnson's official combat account stated clinically, "Opened fire at 300 yards, 30-degree deflection. Saw hits along the full length of the fuselage. Enemy aircraft detonated. Did not see a parachute." Philipp's demise sent shockwaves through the Luftwaffe. If someone of his caliber, who had survived more than 500 sorties on both the Eastern and Western fronts, failed to make it against Thunderbolts, what hope did regular pilots have? The German upper command called for an urgent probe into what the P-47 could do. The findings given to Reichsmarschall Hermann Göring in November 1943 were alarming. The Thunderbolt's maximum service altitude was over 42,000 feet, higher than any German fighter could attain. Its diving velocity neared the speed of sound. The armor plating included a 3/8-inch steel sheet behind the pilot, a half-inch bulletproof glass windscreen, and armored deflectors around the engine. Most unsettling, its tough build made it possible to withstand damage that would take out 3 typical fighters and still make it back to base. In January 1944, a new P-47 version started to arrive in England, completing its evolution from a joke to a dreaded foe. The P-47D-22 version was equipped with a Hamilton standard hydromatic propeller featuring paddle blades 13 feet in diameter, with wide chord blades that bit deeply into the air. The effect on the rate of climb was both immediate and profound. While older Thunderbolts had a poor climb rate of only 2,200 feet per minute at sea level, the paddle blade models could reach 3,000 feet per minute, equaling or surpassing German fighters at many heights. The huge propeller also enhanced acceleration, letting P-47s quickly gain speed during level flight. Hauptmann Heinz Nock of Jagdgeschwader 11, a veteran of over 200 combat flights, faced the upgraded models in February 1944 while intercepting bombers near Hanover. He noted in his battle diary, "The bulky American fighters have figured out how to climb. We attacked a group near Hanover, thinking we'd have our standard edge. They turned to face us and went up with us. When we tried to pull away, they stayed with us up to 30,000 feet. Schmidt was hit and blown to pieces. All that remained was smoke and debris. These are no longer the aircraft we mocked last year." The paddle blade propeller did more than boost flight capabilities. It altered the Thunderbolt's trademark noise. The unique booming created by the propeller tips striking near supersonic velocity was audible for miles. German ground forces reported they could recognize oncoming P-47s solely by their noise. A deep, menacing rumble that signified death from the sky. They began to call it Donnerschlag or thunderclap.